Okay, let's dive in. Picture this. A really tense House Oversight Committee hearing. It's broadcasting live, millions are watching.
Yeah, the air is just thick, aides are whispering, everyone's kind of on edge.
And right in the middle of it, Representative Karoline Leavitt is speaking. She's calm, seems confident, talking policy at the mic.
But then, completely out of the blue, an interruption. From Representative Jasmine Crockett, a few seats over.
And it's sharp, just 3 words. Sit down, girl. Don't embarrass yourself further.
Oof. And it wasn't just the words, right? The source material we're looking at, these excerpts from the Leavitt Declaration, Dignity in Public Service, it mentions the glare. The contempt was really clear.
Yeah, and the source points out that using girl like that carries a lot of historical weight. It hit a nerve for a lot of women, especially women of color.
Exactly. So our mission today, using this account from the Leavitt Declaration, is to really unpack how that single, very poised response,
Yeah.
how it did more than just diffuse the tension.
Right, how it became this really powerful statement that just resonated, sparked this huge conversation about dignity, respect, finding your voice.
We're going to pull out the key pieces from this detailed account, see how that one moment kind of snowballed.
The Leavitt Declaration paints a picture of the immediate aftermath. It's vivid. The room just froze.
Yeah, for like 3 or 4 seconds, everything just stopped. A congressman paused mid-motion, an aide blinked.
Huh.
The stenographer even hesitated.
People watching at home were apparently hitting rewind of like, did I hear that right?
And Leavitt. How did she react right in that instant?
The source makes a point of saying she didn't flinch, not even a little. Took steady breaths, locked this icy gaze right on Crockett.
No.
The cameras caught it perfectly, apparently, just standing there, totally resolute, unwavering.
And then she spoke.
Then she spoke, and according to the Leavitt Declaration, this one line just flipped the whole dynamic. Not yelled, but really clear, really powerful.
Was it?
She said, I was elected to represent my district, my values, and every woman who's been told to shrink herself to please others.
Ooh. That's something.
The source describes it like someone nearby let out this faint sigh, like they just witnessed a perfect counterpunch.
And Crockett's reaction.
Blinked, leaned back a bit, tried to play it off, like pretended to brush dust off her shoulder or something.
Trying to dismiss it. But the energy?
Well, it had totally shifted. Then came this scattered but really meaningful applause. It just broke out.
And outside the room, social media must have gone nuts.
Instantly. The source says screenshots, clips, they just spread like wildfire. Captions like, Jasmine Crockett told Rep. Karoline Leavitt to sit down, girl. News channels are scrambling.
And Leavitt, through all this.
Didn't smile, didn't gloat, nothing like that. According to the source, she just quietly turned back to her notes, picked up her papers, and said, now I'd like to continue.
Just moved on. But the hearing itself.
Yeah, the source notes it kind of lost focus after that. The conversation shifted away from policy, more towards tone, respect, this dynamic of one woman trying to diminish another.
And the source frames this as not the end.
Not at all. It was just the beginning of the ripple effect.
So, okay, maybe you'd think, all right, another viral moment, it'll blow over.
Right. That's what usually happens. But the Leavitt Declaration argues Leavitt was already turning it into something more profound.
How so?
The source really highlights her demeanor, that calm, that refusal to be shaken. It just radiated power, even through a TV screen.
Mm-hmm. And Crockett.
Tried to look unaffected, the source says, but apparently her hands were moving under the table, a sign of tension, maybe. And Leavitt never mentioned her again, apparently, which, according to the source's interpretation, sent its own message. Like, you can't make me small.
That silence speaks volumes sometimes.
Totally. And the Leavitt Declaration details how this resonated, like, really deeply with just ordinary people.
Not just the political junkies.
No, exactly. A college intern getting chills watching it. Hundreds of people online quoting her exact response. Within hours, that little 35-second clip. Hundreds of thousands of views.
And not because of the policy, right? But because of that reaction.
Precisely. News channels, cable news, they played it on loop. Panels started dissecting it.
The source quotes analysts calling it a masterclass in handling pressure. They noted the discriminatory undertones of girl, framed Leavitt's response as, like, dismantling a power play, but with dignity. CNN apparently called it a masterclass.
And this is where, according to the Leavitt Declaration, it gets really interesting. It wasn't just the pundits talking.
Okay.
It was teachers, grandparents, people just living their lives, juggling jobs and kids and bills. They saw something familiar in that moment.
Ah, that connection.
Yeah. The source quotes a teacher from Boise saying something like, "I've been sit-down girl in meetings and classes." Her response hit me hard. That's how you answer back.
Wow. And a grandmother in Oklahoma, the source quotes her too.
Said something like, "My mother couldn't speak up like that. I'm proud Karoline Leavitt did." The source really stresses this wasn't just fleeting drama. It was this quiet, persistent resonance. It got etched into people's hearts.
So Leavitt's team, they must have been swamped.
Flooded. Interview requests pouring in, radio, podcasts, Black creators wanting to talk to her. But her decision strategically was to wait.
Interesting. Why?
The source mentions her gathering her team, and she apparently said privately, "I'm fine, but don't think I didn't catch every detail of that performance. It wasn't just aimed at me. It was a show for anyone standing behind her."
So she saw it as performative on Crockett's part.
That's how the source presents her view. Calls came from Essence, The Breakfast Club, even Jon Stewart's team, according to the account.
Big names.
Huge. But Leavitt's response, as quoted in the source, was, "Let them wait. I'll speak, but when I do, I want to talk to the people who needed to hear today."
Not for the applause, not for the soundbite.
Exactly. But for the girls like me, she apparently said, and others who've been silenced by that tone.
Meanwhile, what was Crockett doing?
Her office put out a statement calling the reaction overblown, urging focus back on policy. But according to the source, it just fell flat, didn't land.
And Leavitt, did she wait long?
She kept her existing commitments. The source details her attending this community event in Baton Rouge, a scholarship ceremony, something planned way before.
Right.
And a young girl approaches her there, tells Leavitt her grandma called her crying because she'd never seen someone respond like that. Not yelling, not backing down, the source quotes the girl saying, "Just calm, full of confidence."
That's powerful feedback.
And Leavitt's words to the girl, according to Leavitt declaration, were, "You don't always have to be calm. What matters is knowing when not to let someone steal your strength."
Not letting them steal your strength.
Those words apparently spread like wildfire. People started calling it the Leavitt declaration.
So the wave wasn't fading. It was actually growing.
Growing louder. The source talks about TikTok edits people setting the clip to rap music, gospel music, adding fireworks, slow motion versions captioned, "This is how a woman who knows her power moves." Millions of views, the source says.
Wow.
Cartoonists sketch the scene, with captions like, "When you try to silence someone but only make their voice louder." Hashtags trended.
One moment, but meaning so many different things to different people.
Exactly. One side celebrating this quiet strength, the other side recalling all the times someone tried to diminish them.
And the source mentions online threads.
Yeah, long ones. People sharing their own stories, getting interrupted in meetings, family arguments, PTA meetings, job interviews, times they were mocked or called girl.
It tapped into a shared experience.
Deeply. The source quotes this one woman, holds multiple degrees, saying she was called girl while explaining complex data. She saw Leavitt's face and thought, "That's me. That's all of us."
Even celebrities chimed in.
Yep. Kerry Washington quoting her response, Shonda Rhimes sharing the clip with just the word dignity.
So what made it stick? Why wasn't it just another viral blip?
The Leavitt declaration suggests it was because ordinary people felt it voiced something they'd never quite put into words themselves. That recognition factor. Even news outlets that normally skip C-SPAN hearings were covering it, using phrases like masterclass in holding power.
And the response to Leavitt's office.
Overwhelming, the source says. Messages tripled capacity. Not just press calls, but thousands of letters, emails, many just saying thank you.
Any specific examples?
The source mentions a woman who hadn't watched the news in 2 years, saw the clip, and cried. A retired Navy officer politically opposed to Leavitt wrote to say he respected how she stood firm without making a scene.
Of course, not all feedback would be positive, right?
No, and the source acknowledges that. Critics, pundits trying to spin it, "Oh, it was a misunderstanding," or "It's just political theater." But the source argues that just added fuel to the fire. People knew what they saw, what they felt. That sense of recognition was powerful.
Look, I could side.
The Leavitt declaration contrasts Leavitt's quiet power with Crockett's situation. Crockett posted a photo the next morning captioned about fighting for freedom. The comments, though, were unrelenting, circling back to the incident. "Still think calling a grown woman girl was a good idea." Things like that.
And she stayed silent on it.
According to the source, yes. The damage wasn't just the words, but what the whole interaction revealed or seemed to reveal about her approach.
While Leavitt still wasn't doing interviews.
Right. She kept attending community events. The source describes this meeting in Atlanta, small room, mostly older women, community organizers. The whole room stood up and clapped when she walked in.
Wow.
One woman's voice was trembling, the source says, as she told Leavitt, "We saw what you did, and ma'am, you did it for all of us."
And Leavite's response.
Simple. I did it because I had to.
Then the source mentions this exchange with the Miss Clara.
Yeah, an organizer. Took Leavitt's hand and said, "You made us proud." And Leavitt replied, according to the source, "I did it for people like you who taught me how to stand tall."
That connects it back, doesn't it, to her roots?
Absolutely. The Leavitt Declaration makes that connection explicit. This wasn't just a random reaction. It came from somewhere, from her upbringing in Memphis.
Tell us about that background, according to the source.
Girl from Memphis, TN, described as having this radiant smile, but also this innate resilience, a voice that refused to be silenced.
Her parents.
Mother Evelyn, a nurse working double shifts, protested injustice. Father Marcus, a union worker, dry humor, callous hands, knew who did honest work. Family wasn't rich or connected, the source says, but very clear on values. Dignity, speaking up even if it wasn't directly about you.
So that sense of justice was ingrained early.
Seems so.
Yeah.
The source portrays her as the high school girl who asked too many questions like, why is the dress code stricter for girls? Some teachers loved her, some maybe feared her persistence.
And college.
Spelman College, political science major, waited tables to get through. The source tells the story about her losing points debating a professor on voter suppression data. She didn't care, pinned the documents up, showed up at city council meetings to hold people accountable anyway.
Driven.
Yeah. Someone apparently saw her there and said, you should run for office.
And she did. Ran for the Georgia House.
Won it. Over 50%, but it was a tight race. The source mentions donors pulling out late in the game thinking she was too blunt, too urban, too unapologetic.
And her reaction to that.
After she won, the source says she sent them thank you cards.
Huh. That says something.
It does. So the point the source makes is that hearing. It wasn't the first time she faced disrespect or underestimation. It was just the first time the nation saw her respond on such a public stage.
She knew those rooms, those dynamics?
Raised in them, in a sense, knew who she was.
Yeah.
And according to the Leavitt Declaration, those who underestimated her were starting to realize it. Congress was about to feel a shift.
So back to the aftermath. While Crockett was trying to salvage her image.
Colleagues keeping their distance, the source notes, female lawmakers apparently texting Leavitt quiet messages of praise.
And this Stand Like Karoline thing was taking off.
Yeah, the movement grew online. Young women in Chicago launched a campaign using the name. A high school in Miami invited her to speak. Her team noted the invitation. It was becoming more than just a hashtag.
In Leavite's focus, still work.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The source emphasizes she kept her rhythm, didn't let the spotlight derail her actual job, saw the power not in views or hashtags, but in trying to create lasting change.
Like the gender equity education proposal.
Exactly. Started drafting it, inspired by the stories she was hearing. Quoted in the source saying, if we teach kids respect early, maybe fewer adults will think they can call someone girl without consequences.
And the source connects this back to her resilience, her mother's influence.
Yeah, a Chimchin, she kept a framed photo of her mother on her desk. A reminder. Crockett's insult wasn't just one insult. The source suggests it echoed hundreds of times she'd been told she was too loud, too blunt, too angry, too hard to control.
That perception issue again. Confidence mistaken for arrogance, especially the source posits, for a black woman.
Right. But the Leavitt Declaration argues she didn't need defending. She knew who she was, and she was letting the story, her response, spread on its own terms.
Okay, so the buzz on Capitol Hill the next morning. The source describes it.
Yeah, palpable. Media scrambling, morning shows skipping stats to talk about the exchange. Everyone wanted to know, would Leavitt speak out?
Different media framing it differently, I imagine.
Totally. The source mentions MSNBC talking about the power of poise, Fox News calling it overblown congressional outrage, CNN analysts saying, doesn't look good for Jasmine.
And Leavite's response to all this noise.
There's still silence. Her office released that brief statement. The source described it as almost like a handwritten note. Simple, direct.
Remind us what it said.
Basically. My words yesterday weren't rehearsed. They reflect experiences many women, especially women of color, have lived their whole lives. I'll always speak up for my district and for dignity.
And the key part.
No attacks, no politics, just clarity. And that clarity, the Leavitt Declaration argues, just cut right through all the noise. The White House even commented, calling it an unfortunate exchange, but praising Leavit's professionalism.
Contrast that with Crockett's office.
Struggling, according to the source, there was supposedly a leaked memo showing advisors urged her to make a joke about it or apologize. She refused. Pride won out, the source suggests.
And attempts to change the subject didn't work.
An ally tried to shift the narrative on a show, but the host wasn't buying it, the source says. The public wasn't letting go. Posts about, say, veterans' issues would get comments circling back to "sit down, girl."
Ouch. And silence from her supporters.
That was maybe the worst part, the source notes. The clip just looked worse on every rewatch.
While Leavitt didn't need to say anything more, really.
No, allies were sending private messages. The source quotes one colleague, Rep. Calvin Porter, texting something like, "You handled that with grace. We saw it's not just about you, it's about all of us."
Her team must have been fielding nonstop calls.
Aide Riley sifting through requests, NPR wants her. But Leavitt, according to the source, kept saying, "Not yet. Just let the story breathe, let it spread organically."
And the invitations kept coming. The View, CBS, PBS, Morehouse.
All wanting to talk gender, race, political civility. But Leavit's stance, as the source quotes her telling her team, remained, "Everyone wants a headline, but if we speak, it'll be on our terms."
While Crockett's dealing with the fallout, colleagues avoiding her.
Leavitt's meeting voters. The source brings up that Birmingham woman again, the one called Girl at 50. Leavitt apparently told her, "Stories like yours are why I stood up."
Connecting it back again. And the Stand Like Karoline movement.
Becoming real, tangible stuff. The source mentions students in Philadelphia holding workshops, a teacher in Denver using the clip in class, hundreds of letters coming in from kids to elders sharing their own stories.
Did she read them?
The source says she read every single one, kept some in a special wooden box.
Wow. And the policy work continued.
Yeah, pushing that gender equity education bill with other lawmakers. The principle, according to the source, if we change how kids see others' worth, we'll change how adults behave.
So the plan was, wait, then speak to the people.
That's what the source describes. Leavitt telling her team, "We wait, then we talk to the people who've lived this. No performing for ratings, we let the message land."
But the media pressure must have been intense.
Mounting. Media doesn't like waiting. And Crockett's continued silence wasn't helping her case. Conservative outlets started distancing themselves. An op-ed called it a self-inflicted cultural misstep, asking, "What happens when performative toughness reveals real insecurity?"
Meanwhile, support for Leavitt.
Growing. Flowers. Notes at her Georgia office. That USB stick from a debate coach. "Stand like Karoline." Even rivals were treading carefully, the source suggests. They saw this as a moment showing what happens when you try to diminish someone who knows their worth.
Then the source highlights this event in Montgomery, Alabama.
Right. 3 days after the hearing, she kept a commitment to speak to a girls' leadership program. No cameras, no press, small gym, sweater, and jeans. The source notes she belonged there not as a politician, but as someone who'd lived it.
And what did she say to them?
According to the source, she started with, "When she said that, I wasn't stunned by shock, but because I'd heard it my whole life." She shared stories of being dismissed, called too strong, too blunt, talked about how staying calm wasn't weakness, it was strength.
Did anyone ask if it hurt?
A girl did. And Leavit's reply, quoted in the source, was powerful. "No, because she wasn't talking to me. She was talking to her idea of me."
Wow, that reframes it completely.
Yeah. The Leavitt declaration stresses it wasn't a prepared speech, just honest talk. Mentioned being mistaken for an aide despite wearing her congressional pin. Talked about learning that sometimes silence is power and you speak when it truly matters.
How did the girls react?
Crowded around her afterwards, the source says. Sharing their dreams, lawyer, student council president. Leavitt listened intently, like they were already leaders.
Well, back in D.C.
Crockett was facing pressure, even allies criticizing her publicly now, trying to emphasize policy on talk shows, but questions about Karoline kept coming up. Called it a misunderstood moment, but the audience seemed unconvinced, according to the source.
And Leavitt was channeling the momentum.
Into action. Partnering with nonprofits focused on girls' leadership, hosting online workshops that united thousands of women, the source says, got invited to an international women's rights conference.
To talk about the gender equity education idea.
Exactly. Her belief, quoted in the source, "We don't just teach kids to read and write, we have to teach them how to see others' worth."
The Stand Like Karoline movement kept spreading.
Woven into school lessons, scholarships created in LA in her name. The source portrays her as knowing exactly how to use the spotlight for actual change, not just fame.
And Crockett.
Gradually withdrew more from public events, focusing on legislative work. Some thought she was biding her time, the source notes. Others wondered if the moment genuinely changed her.
The source includes an anecdote from a mentor in Montgomery.
Yeah, a volunteer named Ruth told Leavitt, "I've done this for 30 years. I've never seen those girls sit so still. You gave them something we couldn't. You showed them how to hold their ground without bending."
And Leavitt's reply.
Gripped her hand, the source says, and replied, "It's the only way I know."
Even grainy clips of that Montgomery talk spread online.
Yep. The source notes commentary like, "She's not speaking from a pedestal, she's speaking like she's lived it. Her office didn't repost them. The moment spread itself."
So the authenticity was key.
Seems so. The source suggests Washington started to shift. The Congressional Black Caucus reached out. A senator from Arizona called, apparently saying, "I didn't grasp how deep this was until I saw you talk to those girls." The power wasn't the viral clip, the source argues, but the realness beyond the lights.
That a closed meeting on Capitol Hill.
Described in the source. 4 lawmakers, bipartisan. One Republican rep, Amos Carver, supposedly said, "That clip's not going away." They knew the public reaction was shaping the landscape.
And then the call from Crockett's office.
Unexpectedly, that afternoon, according to the source, requested a private meeting. No press.
Leavite's reaction.
The source quotes her thinking she's trying to save face. Her aide Riley suggested maybe someone told Crockett it would stick longer than she thought. Leavitt's response, "Fine, but she comes here."
So the meeting happened in Leavite's office.
3 hours later, the source says, Crockett walked in alone. Levi was composed.
What was said?
Leavite, according to the source, "I'm not asking for an apology. I want you to think about it. This job isn't a TV show. People listen."
And Crockett's reply.
"I get it now." That's what the source quotes. No handshake when she left. Leavitt apparently told her press secretary afterwards, "She's shaken, but that's not my problem anymore." No press release about the meeting.
And did things change in public?
The source notes that in the very next hearing they were both in, Crockett didn't interrupt. Stayed quieter. Change had begun, the source states.
So Levi moved forward.
Yeah, drafting that formal resolution on respect in political spaces, especially focusing on women of color. Not just about that one moment, but laying groundwork for real change, proposing codes of conduct, mandatory training.
While Crockett was trying to rebuild.
Public sentiment had shifted, the source suggests, and Levi was getting private messages from colleagues, even across the aisle, thanking her for doing what they didn't dare.
But Levi's focus remained outward.
On voters, listening, inspiring, the source shares more stories. A mother in Savannah whose daughter watched the clip daily, wanting to be strong without shouting. The movement growing, schools inviting her, women's rights groups partnering. A podcast even got inspired by her story about reclaiming your voice.
And the education bill?
Pushed it hard, working with bipartisan lawmakers. Her argument, according to the source, education is not just about knowledge but values. And if we don't teach kids respect, we're leaving another generation to fix our mistakes.
The source closes that section with her reflecting.
Yeah, evening in her Atlanta office, looking at her mom's photo, thinking about the journey from Memphis girl to this woman trying to change Congress, knowing the road was long but feeling she wasn't alone. That girls like the one she met would carry the torch.
And the resolution got a name.
Dignity and Respect in Public Service Resolution.
Okay, so fast forward 2 weeks, Leavitt presents this resolution.
On the House floor. The source describes the scene. Packed chamber, cameras, phones up. But again, emphasizes she didn't perform. She just read the text, clear, concise, unapologetic, called the resolution a mirror.
And the content. What did it call for?
Professional standards, especially in hearings. It explicitly acknowledged, the source says, the painful history of dismissive language targeting women and women of color. Urged Congress to lead by example, not just in policy, but in conduct.
How was it received?
Mixed reactions, the source notes. Some skepticism, but others nodding. Sincere applause when she finished. And it cleared the committee stage with bipartisan support, sparking actual discussions.
Did she reflect on that moment?
Called her mother that night, told her, according to the source, it was like thunder in the chamber.
And the public response continued.
8,000 plus emails in the following days, the source says. Mostly young women thanking her, wanting to act. One student wrote, "I want to be strong like you, but not rude."
That's an interesting nuance. Strength without aggression.
Exactly. Later, on a panel, asked if the moment really sparked change, the source quotes Levi saying, "I think it woke people up, and once people are awake, you can't easily put them back to sleep."
What about Crockett during this time?
The source notes she adjusted her approach, spoke more carefully, focused on policy, worked with advisors. But regaining trust, the source implies, was hard. She did quietly back some similar initiatives later on.
But Levi didn't dwell on Crockett's journey.
No, focused on her own work, refining the resolution, community programs. Accepted that invitation to the conference in London to share how small moments can lead to big change. Her message, quoted by the source, "Every step forward starts with someone standing up."
And the source ends this part with her back in the office.
Yeah, reading another letter, this one from a 15-year-old girl in Birmingham. "I used to think I wasn't good enough to speak up, but you made me believe I can." Leavitt placed it in that wooden box. Knowing, the source suggests, her journey wasn't just about policy, but empowering girls to write their own stories.
So the legacy, the Leavitt Declaration, argues it wasn't really in the immediate headlines.
No, but in hearts
Yeah.
and actions that followed. The source gives this really powerful example 6 months later.
What happened?
Riverfront Academy, Columbus, Georgia, a middle school debate presentation on power and presence. This 13-year-old girl, Nia Carter, steps up to the mic. Looks nervous at first, the source says, then speaks with fire. She quotes Leavitt's House floor speech verbatim. "I was chosen to represent my values, my community, and every girl who's been told to shrink herself to make others comfortable." Teachers were clapping through tears, according to the source.
Wow, that's direct impact.
Then Nia adds her own words, quoted in the source. "I don't want to shout to be heard. I just want my voice to matter." The Leavitt Declaration calls that the magic of legacy echoes in places she's never even been.
Did things actually change in Washington?
The source says the resolution didn't pass in its entirety, no, but it prompted committees to review their operations. Chairs started paying more attention to tone, added conduct guidelines. Slow change, the source suggests, but real.
And Leavitt herself, still focused on the work.
Still working late, meeting voters, reading briefs. Not for fame, the source stresses, but out of duty.
But the perception shifted.
Yeah, how other women saw her, and maybe themselves. The source mentions a young staffer feeling empowered to wear her natural hair because of Leavitt. Even a Republican aide whose boss apparently changed his communication style after witnessing the event.
And Crockett.
Never apologized publicly, the source confirms, but also never used that tone again in public settings. Whether it was regret or political calculation, the source says, didn't really matter. A line had been drawn.
The source includes an airport encounter.
Yeah, really interesting. A woman who politically disagreed with Livy stopped her. Said something like, "How you handled that? It made me rethink what real strength is."
Rethink what strength is.
Leavitt apparently scribbled that phrase down later. The source presents that as her legacy. Not the clapback, but this new model of power, calm, steady, no need for a show.
And the movement continued.
Ongoing workshops, listening sessions. The source mentions a girl afraid of being too strong, seeing maybe it was a good thing. The movement spread Chicago classrooms, Denver scholarships, thank you letters kept arriving in that wooden box.
Crockett eventually regained some ground.
Slowly, yes. Focused on policy housing, collaborating. Leavitt, the source says, didn't seem to care much about Crockett's journey. She was busy refining her bill, pushing leadership programs, heading to that London conference.
Her focus was broader.
Quoted in the source saying, "We're not just changing laws, we're changing how people see each other." Then the source circles back to Nia Carter, the debater. She wrote Leavitt in a letter.
What did it say?
"I won my debate because of you. I didn't shout, but they still listen." Leavitt placed that letter in the box, too. The legacy, the source concludes, is girls like Nia learning to stand up without asking permission.
So she didn't just ride the wave.
No, built something lasting. The source notes the next congressional session, she co-sponsored 3 major bills: education, maternal health, housing equity.
And when asked if the moment had passed,
At a community panel in Mobile, Alabama, the Leavitt Declaration quotes her smiling response. "Moments pass, movements don't. If I leave behind one sentence that makes someone stand taller, I've done my job."
powerful perspective. But the source includes one more message from her.
Yeah, before closing the story, the Leavitt Declaration describes a town hall Leavitt held in Augusta, Georgia. No press, just community folks, barbers, teachers, moms, students, pastors. A town hall, not a headline grab.
Setting the scene.
She began, according to the source, "Let me tell you why I keep showing up. Because one sentence can shift a room. But showing up again and again, that's what changes the world." An elderly woman reportedly whispered to her granddaughter, "Listen close."
What was her core message there?
The source quotes her saying the hearing incident wasn't just about one woman being disrespected. It was about a culture that teaches us who's worthy of respect, who should be ignored, and who's supposed to be silenced. She paused, then added, She was done letting it slide, and I think a lot of you are too.
Connecting her experience to everyone in that room.
Exactly. Saying her response wasn't just about Congress, but about every space that tries to make you shrink, every classroom, boardroom, waiting room, dinner table.
And she made that point about discomfort.
Powerful point, quoted in the source. Have you ever noticed how uncomfortable the world gets when a woman, especially a woman of color, refuses to make herself small? That discomfort isn't your burden to fix, it's theirs to face. Applause followed that, the source notes.
She urged them to use their voices.
Yeah, some of you may never run for office, that's okay. But I promise you this. Your voice matters. In your home, your workplace, your kid's school, at the ballot box. Use it.
And when asked how to keep speaking up,
A young woman asked how you keep speaking when people try to silence you. Leavit's answer, according to the source. You remember who you are before they told you to be quiet. Murmurs went through the crowd.
wow, that hits deep.
She acknowledged her own imperfection. I'm not perfect, but said, I know why I'm here, and I know every time I choose to speak without shouting, stand without performing, respond without apologizing for existing, that's a win. Let the silence linger after that, the source says.
Contrasting power with volume again.
Right. Some people still think power is just about volume. Real power is knowing when to speak, what to say, and then standing still to let it echo.
And her final line at that town hall.
Quoted directly in the source. If you're hearing this and you've ever been told to sit down when you knew you were right to stand, don't forget, you weren't sent here to be silent. You were sent to make a difference. Act like it.
The room erupted, the source says.
Energized. People crowded her afterwards, sharing stories. A daughter now running for student council, an elderly man deciding to attend city council meetings. Leavitt listened, noting the stories down, seeing them as fuel. The source describes it as this raw human response.
As she left.
Slipped out the back. Pulled out her phone, typed in her notes app according to the source. One sentence can go viral, but one stand, that's forever. Driving off, thinking of the faces, those who nodded, whispered, knowing it wasn't just about her anymore, but about them, learning to stand tall in their own lives, the fire spreading beyond Augusta.
So wrapping this up, what does it all really mean? When we look at these excerpts from the Leavitt Declaration, this deep dive, it really shows how one single moment, standing firm with dignity, no shouting, no big performance, how that can ignite a whole national conversation.
Yeah, and the source really highlights how the impact of words matters, maybe more than the intent sometimes, and how choosing to respond to disrespect with poise, with clarity, can fundamentally shift how people see the whole issue and the person being targeted. What's fascinating, too, as this source presents it, is that it wasn't just the viral clip, right? It was the consistent action afterwards, the showing up again and again, listening to people, empowering them, pushing for actual policy. That's what seemed to build something lasting, according to this account.
It moved from a moment to a movement because of that follow-through.
And if you connect that to the bigger picture, the Leavitt Declaration offers this really powerful illustration, doesn't it? About refusing to be diminished, standing up for your values, not just with one good line, but with steady purpose. How that can inspire people, especially maybe in places where bias, conscious or unconscious, still persists.
Which kind of brings it back to you, the listener. It raises that important question, thinking about the themes in this source. Where in your life, in your own spaces, could be a classroom, could be a family dinner, a meeting at work, maybe even online, where you being told, maybe subtly, maybe not so subtly, to kind of sit down, shrink back, when you know deep down you were meant to stand up and make a difference?
Yeah, think about that quiet strength the source describes. That focus on impact over, instant fame, and that message from the Leavitt Declaration that real power isn't necessarily loud. It's about knowing when to speak, what to say, and then just standing still, letting it echo.
Remember those final words in the town hall, as quoted in the source?
Yeah.
You weren't sent here to be silent. You were sent to make a difference. Act like it.
Let that echo with you.